Okay, so funny story. The morning I wrote this, I was bored, so I watched a shitty Clan War recording with a bunch of randoms, and the guy recording was dog shit, man. This comes important in a second. So, as I'm writing this, I've been watching, like, other random videos, like, and I've been playing a little bit of Metal Gear. Not been up to much, but I saw this Conjurer PVP guide from the same dogshit player I had watched Fight of War the same morning, right? And I knew immediately I had to hate watch it. And by God, it was worse than I ever could have expected.
Let's say you have a sunken weapon and that gives soap. Let's say you want to go water magic with that. It will be very bad because it's gonna be applying the same debuff from both your attacks. You can pick fire magic and that will deal 20% more damage against bleeding targets. And bleeding is caused by weapons, a sharp weapon. So you will just be getting 20% more extra damage with it.
I just love this section because it just shows it just doesn't really know Conjurer. Like, first of all, you don't need to be a stun conjurer to use Sunken Sword. As a water conj, Sunken Sword is probably still the best sword. And I know later on I go to say that you shouldn't use PTD as a poison conj, but that's because it's actively worse than, like, Sanguine. I have Rising Tide, Shining Cycle, Whirlwind, and Flash Strike on mine. It's a full AoE moveset that fucking compensate for, like, my lack of being a fighting styles user. And also, fire doesn't deal 20% damage extra. Like, what kind of damage does they think they're doing? Synergies are halved on imbue. So, fire conjurers get about a 10% damage bonus. I saw this Conjurer PVP guide, and it was so bad in fact that it inspired me to make a Conjurer guide myself. So starting off with Conjurer magics. This is of course with 1.17 balance in mind, so if you're one of those melts who watch a video a year after they come out, bear that in mind. So, magics. Conjurer at the moment is pretty fucking stupid as it happens, and just about any magic is decent enough on Conjurer. Some are a bit stronger than others, but most are solid and viable. Some of the best include fire, acid, poison, magma, snow, and wind. Especially wind. Wind is fucking stupid at the moment. I won't go into all the details on the magics because it's a PvP guide. For stats, I know this is common knowledge, but 160 weapon and 120 magic is pretty meta, because you can't reach any benefit above 160 weapons, and there's no additional benefit to magic until 150 magic from 120. I'll get to how to play eventually, but I do want to get the setup of the build out of the way first. Your weapons are a very important part of your playstyle, since they do make up the majority of your moveset as a conjurer. I'd always recommend using either a sunken sword or dual swords. If you use both, you're a bit fucking weird. It's less optimal, less versatile, and the skill ceiling is lower. Dual swords have the benefit of Soaring Eagle and Mirrored River, both cancerous and brilliant moves, and Sunken Sword has Rising Tide, Flash Strike, and a 4th skill slot, allowing for a bit more versatility. The other 2 weapons you use, they're primarily up to your playstyle. As a conjurer, you do have the liberty of using Blast and Beam to support a weapon loadout with poor range capabilities, so bear that in mind. I think now's the time to mention that the different skill slots and weapons have to be arranged differently for the most optimal skill set. This is because the first 2 slots on a weapon have the bonus of needing 10 less weapon stat for the skill. Bearing this in mind, I can now talk about Sparrow Thrust. If you're watching a PvP guide, you're doing either one of 2 things. A, trying to get better because you're shit, or B, you're hate watching. The shit players are the target audience here, and if you're shit, you just learn something very important to you with that 10 less requirement. This is because of Sparrow Thrust being only available on the 1st and 2nd skill slots on Iron Staff. I recommend putting it on Q so you can keep the default keybind of E for Piercing Gale. Also for Dual Swords user, you need to put Soaring Eagle on the 1st and 2nd slot too, and if you're a DOT conjurer like Acid or Magma, use Poison Tooth Dagger. It's fucking OP on those magics. But not on Poison Conj. Don't use PTD on a Poison Conj, it's a waste. Anyway, weapons are way more complex than they used to be, so other than that information, I don't really want to advise you on your weapons loadout. There's just too many variations. So for your gear, I recommend at the very minimum 150 speed. More if you have a slow magic, and if you're running low speed though, and not using wind, lightning, or light, I definitely recommend putting Ardent on your weapons. It's the equivalent of a shit ton of speed in exchange for 10% damage. I'd also recommend Ardent on Greenwish, Staff, and Dagger, because the speed is just very, very good. Another key point to note is optimizing your build. You probably won't want agility, because agility points on top of having a lot of speed is a big detriment to a build. Run around 60 to 100 attack size if you want your AoE close range weapons to be cancer. And you can probably ignore intensity because you have Blast and Beam with a short enough cooldown to mean your weapons aren't a problem. So primarily go for power, speed, and defense. I know it's very meta, very common advice, but it's meta because it fucking works. And finally, combat. If you're new in dogshit, you've got to ingrain the movement into your muscle memory, because I see so many new players not even dashing and high jumping, fucking moving like NPCs. First thing to note is to jump once your dash begins. It gives you extra distance, and high jumping is also important because you're easy as fuck to hit on the ground. You know, who would have thought that aiming factoring for 2 dimensions is way easier than aiming for 3? Now there are 5 main types of shots you can go for. Starting with the easiest is end lag shots. The period where you're stood still in the air after using attack is your end lag. and there's a really easy point to hit shots from. The reason why I recommend speed is to reduce this, and obviously have faster projectiles and such. Then there's falling shots or fall predictions, where you're shooting at a falling target or predicting a projectile for them to fall into the path of. Then there's crest shots, which is like the reverse of a falling shot, where you aim for the top of someone's jump arc, in the hopes they won't cancel a jump or use a dodge reflex. And then there's just normal predicts, where you hope you guess where someone's going to move towards, most easily used on people going directly towards you. And finally there's tracking shots, where usually using a hit scan or really fast projectile, just aiming to hit a moving target. Very rewarding against people using bunny hops, also a pain in the ass for people like me with slowing reaction times to use. I'd recommend to use beams on moving targets, because it's easy chip damage, especially when they're low to the ground. Beams are fucking piss easy to hit. And use more precise moves against people in end lag, because if you feel the need to watch a PvP guide, I guarantee you're not like the 1.12 aimsell, just hitting fucking random ass musket shots on moving targets. And people often move in specific patterns and motions, which you can learn to predict and expect, like using a move at the crest of a jump, playing perfectly into being hit by a crest shot. If you learn to predict that, you can easily get off a lot more attacks. Similar to this is over time when you start figuring out how long people take to charge moves, meaning you can like parry and punish a lot easier. If you start breaking these patterns by doing things like using moves when your leaps aren't fully completed and only charging like halfway, you can catch people out more often and not be punished as easy. I'm now going to talk about like countering a few more niche things. Starting with people backdashing. Just backdash too. They want you in a position where you're chasing them so that you're close to the ground, moving in a linear fashion directly towards them to land easy shots in succession. If you're out of their range, they'll be forced to have the strategy reversed on them, and then you can continue fighting as normal unless they fail to realise backdashing doesn't work on you and try again. If you're in Sumerian, they're just running backdashing and you need to chase them. Use your leaps and be more variable in your dash directions so you don't just eat multiple blasts. I've seen so many people like be running away, someone's chasing them, and they'll just hit the most fucking piss easy shots because they're just being dashed directly towards with like no thoughts. If you're against AoE builds where you can't just dodge or parry reliably enough, you gotta airstall. What's the Earth Iron Leg gonna do about it? They've got fuck all mobility and range, and this works against warriors too, but they have the mobility to counter this and chase you into the sky. In this scenario, you've gotta kinda act as if you're backdashing upwards and hit them with some like heavier moves since they're directly chasing towards you. And to counter people airstalling like this, use musket. Like, okay man, you're at a solid range, and you're trying to stay in place using repeated end lag from spamming moves. Literally ideal shot for musket use. To counter bunny hopping, which is where people end lag fish while spamming 5 times the best solution is to damage trade them or use snares or AoE moves to catch them out. I can't think of any other stupid shit off the top of my head, nor can I think of anything more to say. I do recommend aim training on shit like aim labs. I don't really do it anymore, but it's definitely worth doing if you have the time. Arcane Odyssey combat is really niche, so it's just going to be something you learn over time. It's like Rocket League. There's no other game particularly similar in like gameplay that builds the skills for it. Yeah, peace out, and make sure to leave hate comments on shitty PvP guides.